Well, we're down to our final speaker, and if you've stuck with us, you're not going to be disappointed. Our final guest today is a lifelong friend, now a colleague at the University of Nebraska, Chuck Schroeder. Many of you will remember him from his years as the CEO of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and most recently as the Executive Director of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. Chuck is now the Executive Director for the Rural Futures Institute at the University of Nebraska. He's leading an effort to revitalize rural places, to refocus our energy on rural communities and rural people. Please help me welcome Chuck Schroeder to the stage.
Thank you, Tom. Tom, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel a little bit like a Presbyterian preacher in Nebraska. I'm kind of looking back there for the givers in the back row. But thank you for your interest in hanging around and talking about a little different view of how important you are in the Angus business, in the cattle business, in the livestock business to our country. Here's what's going on. You may think you're in the cow business. You may think you're in the business of producing protein. We've been talking a lot today about innovation and entrepreneurship and building your business and building excitement in your business, and you've been doing that in such remarkable ways. Well, here's what you're doing. You're not just building better ranches, better feedlots, better enterprises. You're building stronger rural communities across this country, and in the process, you are building a stronger America. And if you don't understand that part of your responsibility and your mission, I want to share some things with you today that maybe will open your eyes to those things. What we're beginning to recognize regionally across this country, and in some cases across some states, and I would argue within this generation, we will recognize as a nation that rural really matters. The communities in which you live and in which you're investing, in which you're trying to create the kind of dynamics we've talked about today, those things matter. They matter economically. We know that capitalism is built on small business. We know from the work that we're doing with the Rural Futures Institute at the University of Nebraska and other work that's going on around the country, that rural communities are, in many cases, the best place to build small businesses who support entrepreneurs. Local people support local businesses. We know that strong, vibrant rural communities matter to the economy of the states in which they're located, certainly in the counties and the regions, but they matter to the country. They matter to the economic vitality of everybody in this country, and folks who live in the cities who don't understand the importance of that dynamic in the country are going to have some pretty stark reminders of that, I believe, before long. Rural communities matter socially. Well, what do you mean by that? I mean that rural communities create a dynamic across our states and across our country where young people engage with older people, where dreams are developed, where relationships are developed, where the ability for us to relate to one another are developed. Rural communities matter culturally. We're arguing through the Rural Futures Institute that folks who don't understand and remember their own heritage are doomed to some pretty difficult times going forward. Both celebrating the heritage that brought that community along as well as the heritage that is emerging today with folks that are moving to those communities, creating a new dynamic. It's important culturally to our country. It's important environmentally. Everybody you meet today wants to be green. Everybody wants to be in a community, in a place, in a country that's environmentally responsible. Well, I'm going to tell you, we can't be environmentally responsible if we don't have strong communities in the midst of those resources we're trying to save, and people there who care about those resources and, by the way, understand them better than anyone walking on concrete on a daily basis. It is important that we have strong rural communities in the midst of the land, air, and water that we're trying to protect for future generations, and having people there who are doing things with innovation, who are doing things in an entrepreneurial fashion that will build upon their knowledge and understanding of those resources. So we know that rural matters. Well, when we look at the Rural Futures Institute, it does make me think of things that are going on here at Angus University today. And let me say thanks to the folks at Angus and Merck for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation today. This is a remarkable event. I just was congratulating Eric backstage here. I think that you're plowing some new ground and creating some new opportunities for folks to think about the future of rural America and certainly the livestock industry in an event like this. But what we're trying to do with the Rural Futures Institute is two things. We're trying to attack a very important equation, and that is to build both the capacity, the ability, the agency, as some of the scientists call it, the capacity for rural people to attack their challenges, embrace their opportunities, move toward a preferred future. But the other side of that equation is also trying to build the confidence of folks to overcome. You'll remember Tom Field had that big word fear up here on the screen earlier today, those things that keep us from taking those steps in a direction, taking some risks that are necessary to move in the direction we want to go. It's a significant issue. We know in dealing with rural people across the country that establishing the confidence to attack those problems and move in the direction of their dreams is something we have to work on as well. So what does that have to do with Angus? Well, when I look at the history of Angus, you understand that you have this heritage of innovation, of creating new tools for selection, new tools for moving your product to the marketplace in an exciting way. You are helping to build that capacity for rural people to indeed embrace the opportunities of their future. Likewise, you have this whole history of creating reliable pathways to new and expanded markets. My gosh, you have absolutely set the standard there. I mean, I'm one of several old Hereford kids that are here today, who'd have thunk it, talking at Angus University and absolutely telling you you've done a hell of a job. We're proud to be associated with you. You've had this whole history of creating new markets, helping people to have the confidence that if they take this step, here is the next step available to you. Here is an opportunity for you to capitalize on that risk you're taking here to build upon the capacity we've created for you. Our objective is pretty clear. When people talk about supporting and developing rural communities, quite honestly, I go to sleep. Community, as a generic term, means nothing. What we're doing with the Rural Futures Institute and what I see happening here at Angus University is that you're understanding what Lowell Catlett talked about this morning with the N equals 1, the population of 1. You're identifying the power of the individual to drive change. So what we're all about is identifying that 1 or 2 or 3 leaders in a rural community who have a sense that tomorrow can be better than today, and I have the power to make it so. There may be barriers between me and that objective that I have out there, but there are resources that can help me achieve that objective. That's what we're looking for. Local leaders who are grasping a vision for their community that can make it, and listen to this, can make those communities a legitimate best choice for young adults who are looking for a community in which they can launch their careers, build their families, invest themselves, be active citizens in an environment where they can make a difference. We constantly survey students that are getting ready to graduate from our colleges and universities. We also survey young adults who have perhaps launched their careers in New York, Hong Kong, LA, Chicago, have had some real successes, now have a couple of kids. What they're all telling us is that if we could go to a rural community where we had a legitimate opportunity to make a living, where we knew we would not disadvantage our children educationally or with health care, where there were reasonable access to the humanities through whatever means, we would prefer to locate in a smaller community because we believe it is a place where we can make a difference, where the investment of our values in the school board, in the city council, in the Chamber of Commerce, in our church, in local civic organizations, where we could make a difference. They can't do that in Chicago. We have a significant percentage of this generation coming along, folks, who are very interested in living in those rural communities that you are helping to build. We talk all the time about, oh, we need to retain our young people. If we're going to build our rural communities, we have to retain our young people. Well, let me tell you, the only people who like to be retained are attorneys. Everybody else likes to be attracted. They are looking for strong, vibrant communities where they have a legitimate opportunity to chase their dreams, to be successful in pursuit of their objectives. So we're looking for local leaders who are trying to do the same thing. You know, when we think about the livestock industry and the cattle industry in particular, we're proud of some things. We have this wonderful history of courage, of perseverance, neighborliness, family orientation. These are our traditions. This is our heritage that we're so proud of, and we talk about it a lot, and we should. But we need to remember, we also have a very powerful heritage of innovation, of entrepreneurship, of taking what we have and what we know and turning it into what we want. You know, when I was at NCBA, I used to shake my head at conversations I would have with folks who would say, gosh, if we could, you're always talking about this change and change in the cattle industry and change all the time. Gosh, if we could just go back to the days of old A.K. Mitchell and some of those great old ranchers of the past, not talk about all this change. It was laughable. Those guys were all about change. They never got up one morning thinking the way we did it yesterday must surely be the way we would have to do it today, and certainly not tomorrow. We have a very proud heritage of driving change, taking what we have and what we know and turning it into what we want. We can't lose that. When we talk about tradition and heritage, we should be very proud of all of it, but we want to be very careful about what it is we want to perpetuate. And here, I would argue, is what we're trying to do. Rural communities today face a broad variety of issues. There have been programs with rural in the title, with objectives for rural development for more than 100 years. But quite honestly, for most of that time, they were focused on the price of corn, cattle, or pigs. That's not the way it is today with rural communities. We look at a lot of issues. Number one is job creation, entrepreneurship, small business development. Rumpelstiltskin is retired. We cannot spin gold from straw in rural communities today. We have to be talking about entrepreneurship, business growth, business development. We know that rural communities can be the best place to establish a small business, and we've got them across the country. That has to be our number one priority. Leadership development, youth engagement, education, health care, natural resource conservation and sustainability, workforce availability. These are all things, I'm telling you, that are not a product of my imagination. These are all things that, as I talk to rural community folks across Nebraska and now more across the country, these are all things that are fed to me, saying these are issues we have to wrestle with. We have to overcome this challenge in order to get to this plateau. Can you help us? Other issues, transportation, telecommunication, immigration, housing, community infrastructure, law enforcement, quality of life. I would add, by the way, child care, early childhood development are issues that I'm hearing from young adults in our rural communities that they have to wrestle with, have to find solutions for in order for them to pursue their dreams. So what we're trying to do is bring together those resources that can help these folks wrestle with those issues and pursue their opportunity. Well, what's going on at Angus? Think about this. Think about this. Here is an organization, an element of the livestock industry that has a powerful collective effort with very strong and visionary leadership. That is your history. That is your heritage. Think about those men and women who have gone before you and who are in key positions today who have brought that kind of strong leadership. That leadership that encourages entrepreneurship, that encourages economic growth in rural America. That's such important stuff that comes from Angus. And let's also recognize that it didn't just happen. I have to tell you, as I go around meeting with folks in rural communities and seeing some tremendous success stories, it's fascinating to me. Broken Bow, Nebraska is one of my classic examples. When I left Nebraska in 1996, here was a community in Custer County right up in the center of Nebraska, up in the Sandhills, that had been devastated by the farm crisis of the 1980s. Wonderful community. I grew up showing steers and roping at their rodeo, and I judged their county fair 3 or 4 times. There's one of the most wonderful little rural communities in America that had just been slam dunk. You go there, it was like going to a community in Europe after World War II. A whole generation of people gone because of the ag crisis. Crumbling infrastructure, empty storefronts downtown, banks failing, all those things that define a failing community. You go to Broken Bow today, which I did shortly after coming back to the University of Nebraska last December. Here is a thriving community of 3,500 people with 5 active banks, no empty storefronts on Main Street. In 2013, 12 business startups, 11 expansions, $27 million in capital investment in that little community in the middle of Nebraska. A new campus of Mid-Plains Community College based upon a $2 million fund drive that was done in about 5 weeks in a little community of 3,500 people. So when I use them as an example, I have folks say, well, sure, Broken Bow, well, they're doing fine. Gosh, they've got the sale barn there, and they've got wind farm outside of town, and well, sure. They didn't discover gold or oil wells in Custer County, Nebraska. Here's what happened. A small group of young professionals, young business people in that community, some had grown up there, been there 2 or 3 generations, others had moved there more recently and bought businesses. They're sitting around having an iced tea, I suppose, one evening in Broken Bow, and they just said, we're not okay with our community being the way it is and failing. What can we do? Times were tough. There was no big rainbow over the hill. But they said, why don't we at least start talking differently about our community when people come to visit? How about if we talk about the 2 good things that are happening rather than all the people that are gone and the businesses that are closed? Let's talk about 2 good things that are happening and 3 things that we would like to have happen. How about if we do that? Next thing you know, the local newspaper said, well, I can help with that. The local radio station says, well, I can help with that. First thing you know, one thing led to another, to another, to another. It is today one of the most thriving rural communities in America. What happened with Angus? Did all the successes we're talking about here today come as a result of prosperity that just rained down from the clouds? No. It began with a few people saying, we're not okay with the way this is. We think tomorrow can be better than today, and we think we have the power to make it so if we work together, and we're going to have to make some perhaps risky decisions. So they did that 40 years ago. Genetic Evaluation Program, CAB, focus on communication and marketing. That led to a remarkable impact on ranchers and their communities today that no one could have predicted. Because a handful of people said, we're not okay with the way this is. We're not sure how to get there, but we're going to take step after step after step and move in that direction. It is a classic American story of people taking individual responsibility for who they are, where they are, what they're doing, where they're headed, and trying to reach for their dreams. It is not a story of bureaucracy. It is not a story of socialism. It is a story of individual responsibility and individual contributions based upon their particular skills. their particular aptitudes, their strengths, their ambitions, their passions that led to a much greater whole. Quality and safety of your product, absolutely. One that has been so warmly received in the marketplace and reaped such rewards in the marketplace, absolutely. But it also led to the quality and economic vitality of the community at large. Individual communities and the livestock industry as a community at large. That is the way it can work in the United States of America. So what's our biggest challenge? Quite honestly, as we work with rural communities, and in Nebraska we have a relatively unique measuring system we call the Nebraska Rural Poll. It's been going on for 19 years, and every year we ask a series of questions about the kind of rural Nebraska people would like to see, in particular issues from climate change to NRDs to you name it. But one question we always ask is, what kind of rural Nebraska would you like to see? And by the way, we believe this is replicable across the country, but here's the answer we get very consistently over 19 years. 65 to 80% of people will say, well, we want to have a growing rural population, rather evenly distributed. We would like to see most off-farm employment coming from small businesses that are developed in our communities. We would like to see strong, vibrant communities as small as 500 people, even smaller, distributed across our state. 65 to 80% will every time say, that's the kind of Nebraska we want to see. But then we'll ask, do you believe in 20 years you'll have that kind of rural Nebraska? 30% say yeah. 80% know where they want to go, 30% have the hope required to move in that direction. It is our biggest challenge, and it is where you can make a difference. The most important outcome of your work, of our work with the Rural Futures Institute, is impacting hope. And I'm talking about hope in a very real sense, a scientific sense. We're working with Dr. Shane Lopez at Gallup, who's a senior scientist there, who has dedicated his life and career to the study of hope. This is not the glass is always half full, keep a smile on your face, walk on the sunny side. That's not what we're doing. We are talking about genuine hope because we know that hope matters. We know whether you are an individual facing a life-threatening disease, whether you are a business owner facing a cataclysmic downturn in your market, whether you are a rural community like Pilger, Nebraska, that has 75% of its community blown away in one evening in June, we know that the likelihood of your success in overcoming those issues has everything to do with hope. We know also that hope is a choice. Hope is not something you're born with. It's not some blessing that rained down on you. It is a choice. It is an active choice. And we can train people to make those choices, to take those steps in a direction of their dreams, even if they don't know for sure that they can get there. We know that hope can be learned. We know it is a teachable skill. We know that folks can learn the steps of hope, and we know that hope can be shared. We know that when we can find that group of 2 or 3 leaders in a community, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of all these macroeconomic things that people will shove at us to tell us why our rural communities can't work, we have abundant examples of why that's hogwash, by the way. When we can find those 2 or 3 people that believe they can go from here to there, we know that it can become contagious. We know that when that small group of young people in Broken Bow, Nebraska said, we're just not okay with this place being like this, and we're going to do this. Well, next thing you know, 3 more said, well, we'll do this. And pretty soon, some businesses in that community that had been very much part of the problem and had said, don't bug me, we're just trying to make a living here, decided maybe we should be part of the solution. And one thing led to another, to another, to another. Hope can be shared, and it can become contagious. So in the end, we know that the kind of hope that Angus has developed in the livestock industry really matters. We know that that kind of hope inspires the vision of people who are leading rural communities. It inspires young families who are trying to decide the course of their lives and where they're going to invest themselves, where they're willing to take some risk in order to go from where they are to where they'd like to be. We know that matters. So I just want to say thanks to all of you that are involved with Angus for your long-standing, very hopeful leadership in rural America. And I hope if we have the opportunity to work together, we can harvest some of that from you and help you invest it in some strong rural communities that are building America today. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thanks, Chuck.